A single father noticed his daughter watching a deaf waitress struggle with an order, and their reaction changed the course of their lives. Before diving into the story, drop a comment letting us know where you are watching from. We love seeing how far these messages reach. Lucas Crawford sat in the fading light of the Murphy's Diner parking lot, gripping his steering wheel like he was trying to strangle it. In the rearview mirror, his 9-year-old daughter Maisie was engaged in her new favorite habit. She was picking silently at a loose thread on her backpack strap, a sure sign that speech therapy had been a disaster again. This was their Thursday ritual, an unbroken cycle for the 4 months since they had relocated to this sleepy, forgotten town just outside Cincinnati. First came the 4:30 session with Miss Karen, a woman who possessed all the patience and kindness the profession required. Then came dinner at Murphy's at 6 o'clock, mostly because Lucas was too drained to cook after 10 hours of electrical work and pretending he wasn't drowning. There is a specific kind of agony reserved for parents watching their child suffer through something they are powerless to fix. It strips you down until you feel like the most incompetent man on earth. Lucas had spent the better part of a year watching Maisie's stutter spiral out of control after the move ever since she left behind her old school, her friends, and her safety net because he had to take a high-paying contract just to keep a roof over their heads and pay for the therapy she now desperately needed. The silence was the worst part. She used to be a chatterbox narrating her life from the moment her eyes opened until she passed out at night, a constant stream of beautiful noise. Now, she would go entire days barely stringing 10 words together, terrified of the humiliation of getting stuck on a syllable. Watching her fade away like this was tearing him apart. He twisted in his seat to face her. "You hungry bug?" Maisie offered a small nod without lifting her eyes. Lucas pushed on channeling every parenting blog he had read about engaging a withdrawing child. "Miss Karen told me you did great with the breathing techniques today. I am really proud of you." Maisie's face twitched into a ghost of a smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. She whispered that it was okay, stumbling only slightly on the vowel, and Lucas decided to take the win quit while he was ahead and go get some food. Murphy's was the quintessential small-town grease spoon, looking exactly like every other diner in the Midwest. It featured red vinyl booths held together by duct tape and a black and white checkered floor that had been worn gray by decades of foot traffic. There was a jukebox in the corner that had been silent since the 90s and a menu with exactly 4 items worth eating. Lucas and Maisie pushed through the door, triggering the jingle of the overhead bell, and Jean, the owner, stood behind the counter wearing a look of profound resignation. It was the face of someone who had kept a dying business alive for 30 years simply because she had forgotten how to do anything else. They slid into their designated booth by the window, and Lucas grabbed 2 plastic menus. The ritual was set in stone, grilled cheese and tomato soup for Maisie, a burger for him, a routine unbroken for 4 months. That was when Lucas spotted the server heading their way. It was not Sheila, the regular Thursday shift worker. This woman was new, perhaps in her late 20s, with dark hair tied back, moving through the dining room with a focused, intense precision as if one wrong move would shatter the world. When she reached their table, she pulled a small notepad and a pen from her apron. Instead of the standard cheerful greeting, she offered a warm smile and presented the notepad where a message was already penned in crisp blue ink. "Hi, I am Hannah. I am deaf. I can read lips if you look at me and speak clearly, or you can write it down, whichever you prefer." Lucas stared at the paper, his brain catching up before he looked up to meet her eyes and enunciated carefully. "Hi, Hannah. I am Lucas. This is Maisie. Nice to meet you." Hannah's smile deepened into something real, and she gestured to the pad as if to ask, "So, what are we having?" Maisie was staring at Hannah with that intense, unfiltered curiosity children have when they encounter something new, and have not yet learned the social grace of looking away. Lucas felt a spike of anxiety, hoping she wouldn't say anything insensitive. But Maisie remained silent, watching intently as Lucas placed their standard order, slowing his speech to ensure Hannah caught every word. "Grilled cheese and tomato soup for her, a burger with fries for me, and 2 chocolate milkshakes, please." Hannah scribbled it down efficiently, flashed a thumbs up, and disappeared toward the kitchen. Lucas looked back at his daughter and saw a contemplative look on her face, the gears in her mind turning rapidly. The diner was sparsely populated. A pair of truckers sat at the counter, a loud family occupied the corner, and a suit-wearing businessman near the kitchen was hammering away at his laptop, radiating an aura of self-importance that clashed with the humble surroundings. Yet against all odds, he found himself right there. Lucas sat there, guiding Maisie through her times table's simple equations she was absolutely crushing since numbers didn't demand conversation until a noise cut through the air. The sharp, irritated tone of a customer nearby grabbed his attention. Lucas glanced up to catch Hannah hovering with her writing pad visibly bewildered while the man flailed his arms in frustration. "I specifically requested 0 onions. Are you deaf or something? Hold the onions on the patty." The words tumbled out rapidly, his gaze glued to his laptop screen rather than acknowledging her presence. Hannah shifted her weight, straining to catch a glimpse of his mouth, but he wouldn't sit still. Giving up, she scribbled a quick note and thrust the paper into his line of sight. The suit let out an exaggerated huff, eyes rolling heavenward. "This is absurd. Send over a server who actually comprehends the language." His volume had climbed high enough to draw Jean's attention from the register, causing several other diners to crane their necks. Hannah's expression flattened instantly, a defensive mechanism honed by someone who had weathered this storm 1,000 times before. Jean marched over to de-escalate, taking down the order personally as Hannah quietly receded into the background. A wave of vicarious shame hit Lucas instantly, curdling into anger toward the man who treated basic courtesy like an exorbitant expense. For a second he questioned why she didn't rely on a digital tablet or a speech-to-text app. It felt like the logical answer. However, Jean would later explain they attempted that approach initially only to have patrons gripe about the delay and the lack of human connection. Truth was certain folks were just determined to be miserable regardless of the accommodations. 10 minutes down the line, Hannah returned with their plates, placing them gently on the table and offering a warm, specific grin just for Maisie. The little girl observed her with deep contemplation. As the waitress turned to leave, Maisie raised her hand and formed a shape in the air. Her fingers moved with a precise intention that triggered a memory for Lucas, a scene from the diversity assembly at her elementary school the previous year. "Sorry." Hannah froze in her tracks, spinning on her heel just as Maisie repeated the gesture. It clicked for Lucas. His daughter was saying "thank you" in American Sign Language. The mask of professional politeness shattered, replaced instantly by a look of pure shock and unadulterated delight. Her hands flew up to respond, signing, "You are welcome." She quickly fingerspelled a question about how Maisie knew the language, causing the girl to shrink back into her shell. Lucas quickly interjected, explaining, "Her school runs an inclusivity workshop where all the students picked up the basics. She's been rehearsing at home." It wasn't a lie. Maisie had actually demonstrated a few phrases for him recently. He just hadn't grasped how much stuck. Hannah's eyes glistened with unshed moisture as she directed a signed message toward the child. Lucas couldn't decipher the meaning, but the waitress beamed at them, a radiant expression that crinkled the corners of her eyes before returning to her shift. Glancing down, Lucas saw his daughter gazing at her sandwich, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. A knot of tension that had resided in his chest for months finally began to unravel. They continued their meal in peace. Maisie remained silent, yet the quality of the silence had shifted. It wasn't the fearful shutting down he'd witnessed lately. Rather, she seemed lost in a pleasant daydream. As they exited, she flashed a wave at Hannah, who reciprocated from the far side of the room. Driving back in the pickup, Lucas broke the silence. "That was incredibly kind of you," he said, adding a clumsy sign for emphasis. "I guarantee you just became the highlight of her shift." Then, without a single stammer, Maisie spoke up. "Everyone at my last school teased Zoe for being deaf, but she was my buddy, so I learned how to sign so we could chat. I didn't really think about it tonight. It just happened." Lucas squeezed the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white, overwhelmed by the sheer goodness of his child's heart. "That was beautiful, Bug. I'm so proud of you." Maisie turned her gaze back to the passing scenery, but the window glass betrayed a beaming reflection. Unbeknownst to Lucas, on the other side of town in a cramped studio that barely fit a bed, Hannah sat staring at a mobile banking app. The screen read $1,847. She ran the numbers mentally for the 100th time. She was juggling a trio of employment gigs, waiting tables 4 evenings weekly, stocking grocery aisles 3 early mornings, and spending her weekends walking pets for the wealthy residents in the hills. Every ounce of effort was channeled toward a singular ambition: accumulating the funds to relocate to Columbus, Cleveland, or any place boasting a vibrant deaf population somewhere. She wouldn't be an anomaly. Somewhere, existence didn't require constant justification. This current zip code was merely a way station. That was always the plan. She had landed here 8 months prior, fleeing a scenario that had become dangerous. This was simply as far as her limited cash for a bus fare could carry her. She had sworn a vow against forming emotional tethers to locations or individuals. Connection led to stagnation, and stagnation made you a target. The serving position was the freshest attempt, only 2 weeks old, yet the writing was already on the wall. Jean had cornered her the previous day, voice heavy with regret. "Hannah, you hustle hard, but the complaints are piling up. I can't risk the clientele. I can give you shifts until the 30th, but honestly, you need to find a new gig." Hannah just gave a stiff nod, pretended it didn't sting. What other choice did she have? She swiped out of her bank balance and pulled up the digital notepad where she charted her escape. If she stuck to the budget, she'd hit $3,000 by January. That covered the first month's rent, the security deposit for a decent studio in the city, and a tiny safety net. It was doable. The strategy was simple: stay invisible, stay focused. Yet her mind wouldn't stop drifting back to that kid in the booth, maybe 9 or 10 years old, the way she signed "thank you." So timid, so precise it looked rehearsed. It caught Hannah off guard. She'd spent months blending into the wallpaper, and suddenly someone actually saw her. That spark of warmth in her chest terrified her. Better to snuff it out and stick to the spreadsheet. Spreadsheets didn't break your heart, people did. A fortnight after that silent exchange, Lucas and his daughter strolled into Murphy's ready for their weekly ritual, only to find a stranger patrolling their usual tables. Maisie's face fell, but only for a heartbeat. She shrugged it off and dove back into her schoolwork, resilient like kids usually are. Lucas, on the other hand, felt a hollow thud in his gut, a feeling he wasn't keen on analyzing. Sheila was back on rotation, the same veteran server who'd covered the shift before Hannah arrived. She scribbled down their requests with the mechanical apathy of a lifer, someone who'd been hauling plates for 20 years and had run out of patience around the turn of the century. The question, "Where's Hannah?" sat on Lucas's tongue, but he swallowed it, felt too personal. How would he even phrase it? "Hey, where did the deaf girl go? We preferred her." Even in his thoughts, it sounded awkward. So he stayed silent, helping Maisie wrestle with fraction problems until the plates arrived. Then Maisie glanced up. "Where's the nice lady?" Her stutter barely snagged on the W. Lucas sighed. "Not sure, bug. Maybe her shifts changed. Schedules get moved around." Maisie just murmured, "That's sad," with brutal honesty, then returned to her numbers. End of conversation. She was 9. She had bigger problems than a missing server, but for Lucas, it lingered. The thought nagged at him with every bite of his cheeseburger. When Jean swung by with the coffee pot, Lucas tried to play it cool. "Hey, Jean, the new girl Hannah, did she swap days?" Jean's expression tightened. He scanned the room, checking for eavesdroppers. He leaned in, voice low. "Nah, let her go. Just wasn't a fit. Too many folks griping about the communication barrier. Hated doing it, but I can't afford walkouts." "You get it." Lucas nodded. He did. Jean was captaining a sinking ship in a ghost town. Every customer was a lifeline. It was cold hard arithmetic. No bad guys here, just survival. Yet Lucas pushed back. She was really trying, though. Never messed up our food. Maisie loved her. Jean's features softened. "I know. Sweet kid. Worked like a dog. Cleaned up after hours without me asking. But effort doesn't pay the electric bill when regulars are yelling at me. Strictly business." Conversation over. Lucas settled the tab and drove Maisie back, but a weight settled in his chest, something he couldn't define. Maybe it was watching his own daughter battle for every syllable for the last year, seeing strangers roll their eyes when she stammered. There was a painful symmetry there. Hannah fighting for a foothold in a world that refused to give her an inch. Next Thursday rolled in. Therapy, then dinner. While Maisie washed up, Lucas hovered by the register. Jean looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Lucas cleared his throat. "Just an idea. What if you posted a sign asking for patience? Some folks might respect a place that tries to be inclusive. Could bring in a different crowd." Jean looked at him like he'd proposed burning the place down. "You think this town gives a damn? They want it fast and cheap. They don't want to scribble orders on a pad." Lucas shrugged. "Maybe, but what's the harm? Worst case, you're back where you started. Best case, you earn some loyalty, just something to chew on." Jean went silent, eyes fixed on the battered cash drawer. "I'll think about it," he said. The tone was dismissive, the kind that promised absolutely nothing. Lucas let it lie. He'd said his piece, and pushing further would just be antagonism. He wasn't trying to be a savior or fix the broken parts of the world. He was simply a man who had a thought and voiced it. Yet the following Thursday, a small chalkboard sat near the register, scrawled in Jean's jagged handwriting, "We're working on being more inclusive." Beneath it, "Your patience is appreciated." A quiet, surprising satisfaction bloomed in Lucas. Jean had actually listened. Over the next few weeks, Lucas observed the room. Some patrons read the sign and offered a silent nod. Others looked right through it. Then there was the older gentleman who grumbled aloud that political correctness was ruining everything, even a damn chalkboard sign. Gene's expression remained stone-faced while he jotted down the man's order. You don't argue with the revenue stream even when they're being absurd. The diner didn't suddenly transform into a sanctuary of grateful, open-minded citizens. Business held steady exactly as before, maybe a slight dip when a couple of regulars vanished, or perhaps just a coincidence. Gene kept the sign up regardless. It cost him nothing, and who knows, maybe it helped. Lucas was refueling at the station next to the grocery store on a random Tuesday when he spotted Hannah through the glass stocking the cereal aisle. Before he could talk himself out of it, he racked the pump and walked inside, acting as if he had a sudden, urgent need for groceries. He grabbed a cart and wheeled it toward the breakfast aisle, feigning deep interest in the price tags. Hannah looked up, her eyes widening in a sharp double-take as recognition hit. Her face cycled through a rapid sequence, shock exhaustion, then a cautious warmth. "Hey, Hannah," Lucas said. He made sure she had a clear view of his lips. She offered a small smile, pulled out her phone, and began to type. She turned the screen toward him. "Hi, Lucas. Where's Maisie?" "She's at school," Lucas replied. "Just grabbing a few things on my lunch break." A lie, naturally. He'd come in specifically to find her, but admitting that felt too intense. Hannah typed again. "Tell her I said hi. She's a sweet kid." "I will," Lucas said. "Hey, I noticed you weren't at the diner anymore. Everything good?" Hannah's expression shifted, her fingers moving more slowly across the glass. She showed him the message. "Jane had to let me go. Too many complaints. It's fine. I needed more hours here anyway." The way she phrased it, "it's fine," carried the distinct weight of something that was absolutely not fine, but she wasn't about to unravel in the cereal aisle. Lucas felt that familiar tightening in his chest. "That sucks. I'm really sorry. For what it's worth, you were the best server they had." "Always friendly. Maisie was bummed when we stopped seeing you." A glassy sheen covered Hannah's eyes, but she blinked it away and typed, "Thank you. That actually means a lot." Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, grimaced apologetically, and typed, "I have to get back to work. Manager is strict about phone use on the floor." "Yeah, of course," Lucas said. "Hey, can I give you my number? Just in case you ever want to grab coffee or something. No pressure." Hannah studied him for a long beat, trying to decipher if this was pity charity or something else. Lucas kept his expression open and honest. It wasn't any of those things. She just seemed like someone who could use a friend in this town, and he knew the sting of isolation well enough. She handed him her phone. He entered his number, texted himself to establish the link, and she gave him a genuine smile and a little wave before returning to the shelf. He left feeling like he'd finally done something right. That night he texted her, nothing heavy. "Hey, it's Lucas. Hope the rest of your shift wasn't too brutal." She replied an hour later, "Not too bad. Thanks for saying hi today." That was it. Just a normal exchange between two people being human. He texted a few times over the next 2 weeks. Super casual, once asking if she'd found any good coffee spots, to which she replied, "No, everywhere has terrible coffee." Once mentioning that Maisie had asked about her job hunt. Hannah said she was picking up more hours at the store. Her responses were polite, but brief, not rude, just clearly not seeking a deeper connection. Lucas got the message after the second week when he sent, "Maisie's school is doing a fall festival this weekend. If you're around and want to come, no pressure." Hannah responded 6 hours later, "Thanks, but I'm working. Appreciate the invite, though." He realized he was doing that thing guys do, convincing themselves they're just being friendly when in reality they're hoping for something more. Hannah was letting him down gently, but she was definitely letting him down. He didn't text again. He just let it fade out natural and quiet. Truth be told, a wave of relief washed over him. His existence was already a tangled mess without tossing another unknown variable into the chaos. Lucas remained oblivious to the fact that Hannah had spent 20 agonizing minutes staring at that invitation, paralyzed by indecision. A deep, buried instinct craved the outing to witness Maisie and meet Lucas beyond the confines of business to steal just one afternoon of genuine human warmth. Yet her survival instinct, the steel armor she'd forged over the last 8 months, screamed that attending a school fair with a father and child was the slippery slope to emotional bonding. And bonding meant planting roots. Roots meant entrapment, and she had fought too hard to break free from her cage to gamble her freedom on a kind tradesman and his adorable girl. So she fired off a courteous rejection, her heart sinking even as her chest loosened. The weekend blurred into a cycle of walking strangers' dogs, organizing pantry aisles, and obsessively tallying her stash. $2,116. She kept whispering to herself that isolation was the only safe play. But God, the hollowness inside her echoed louder than it had in years. 90 days of radio silence stretched between them. In that gap, the mundane machinery of life kept turning unnoticed, quiet, yet transformative in the way only time can be. It wasn't about cinematic climaxes, but rather the slow, steady drip of days reshaping their reality. Lucas remained diligent with Maisie's Thursday sessions, and her speech impediment began to soften around the edges. It wasn't a miracle cure. Speech pathology doesn't work that way, but the blocks were fewer, granting her a voice in the classroom. She even signed up for the after-school art program, a monumental step for a child who had previously used silence as a shield. The pride nearly choked Lucas during parent-teacher night when Ms. Rodriguez revealed that Maisie had volunteered to recite her poetry aloud. Meanwhile, Hannah ground through her trio of gigs, watching her bank balance creep upward. $2,400, $2,700, $2,950. Each $100 bill served as another layer of mortar in the fortress she was constructing against a suffocating past that had nearly erased her. Her schedule became a precisely calibrated machine, slinging hash on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturday nights, stocking produce Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sunday mornings, wrestling leashes every weekend afternoon. Collapse into bed. Wake up, do it again. It was a grueling existence, but she owned every second of it, and that autonomy was untouchable. Yet, as November waned, a subtle tectonic shift began in her psyche. No thunderclaps, just a nagging whisper that surfaced while she stacked beans, bussed dishes, or walked that ancient retriever. Specifically, Mrs. Patterson's golden retriever, a dog that navigated the sidewalk at a glacial 1 mile per hour. The question plagued her: if you sprint away from potential pain, aren't you also sprinting away from the possibility of actually living? Hannah loathed that logic. It forced her to dissect the nomadic loop she'd been stuck in, fleeing town after town the moment stability threatened to turn into vulnerability. She had been attending counseling sessions since late summer. Dr. Reeves was her name, a trauma specialist at the community clinic who charged based on income. Hannah initially sought help because the night terrors featuring her ex had resurfaced with a vengeance. She needed a strategy better than white-knuckling through anxiety spikes alone in her flat. Dr. Reeves was skilled. She never shoved, only offered inquiries that unraveled Hannah's defenses. During an early December appointment, she posed a hypothetical, picture yourself staying put, truly planting roots. What do you see? Terror, Hannah admitted instantly. Pure terror. Reeves simply nodded. Understood, but let's explore why that is. That question demanded a pause. The truth was brutal. Every anchor she'd ever dropped had been forcibly severed, her family disowning her for her sexuality, her ex quarantining her from support systems. Even the corporate world had betrayed her, like that layoff in Michigan, where the deaf staffer was deemed unnecessary overhead. Constant motion felt safer than risking another amputation of her spirit. Then, Dr. Reeves dropped a truth bomb that lodged in Hannah's mind like a shard of glass. She said solitude isn't the antidote to pain. Healing is finding connection with people who won't harm you, and you'll never discover them if you bolt before the introduction. Hannah went home and wept for 60 minutes straight, despising the accuracy of the diagnosis. Just before the holidays, the grocery store bumped her up to inventory lead, a role carrying a $4 raise, real benefits, and a predictable roster. Her boss, Brad, delivered the news with genuine appreciation. "You're the rock of this team," he said. "Always punctual, never call out. You just get the job done. We need more of you around here." That sentence sparked a foreign sensation in Hannah's chest, a warm, steady thrum she eventually identified as self-worth. It felt like putting down roots, like she was constructing a life of substance, even if the foundation was just a shift supervisor role at a local market. The raise allowed her to shed the dog-walking hustle. The timing was grimly convenient, given that the weekend shifts were brutal, and Mrs. Patterson's ancient golden retriever had finally let go last month, making the decision to quit bittersweet but necessary. For the first time in an age, her calendar wasn't a suffocating grid of obligations. She actually had room to exhale. Genuine leisure hours appeared, moments not consumed by frantic transits between shifts or recovering from bone-deep fatigue. On New Year's Eve, sat in the quiet of her apartment, crunching numbers, she realized the escape fund was complete. She could launch herself to Columbus by February. $3,200 sat in her account, the price of a new beginning. Yet, as she thumbed through rental listings, the screen elicited zero emotion. There was no dopamine hit, no thrill of the chase, just a hollow numbness, as if she were observing a stranger's destiny rather than her own. That apathy was the tell. Her subconscious had already vetoed the move long before her brain caught up. The urge to run had vanished, replaced by a terrifying curiosity to remain exactly where she was. She wanted to attempt actual living, not just execute a survival strategy, a shift in perspective that was simultaneously petrifying and liberating. On January 3rd, after 3 months of radio silence, she finally broke the impasse with a simple text to Lucas. "Is the mud at Murphy's still undrinkable?" 10 agonizing minutes ticked by as she stared at the screen, bracing for a cold shoulder or polite dismissal. But his reply pinged back only 2 minutes later. "Absolutely. Toxic. I'm convinced Jean is still using a filter from 2008. You feeling brave enough to hazard a cup?" A goofy grin spread across Hannah's face as she typed her reply. "Yeah, when are you free?" And just like that, Saturday morning was booked. Lucas had arrived early, claiming their familiar corner booth. When Hannah entered, she caught his reaction instantly and saw his features brighten with raw enthusiasm for a split second before he reined it in, smoothing his expression into something safe and breezy. She slipped into the vinyl seat opposite him, her stomach fluttering with a nervous energy she hadn't navigated in years. Jean approached with the pot eyebrows raising slightly at the reunion. Hannah reached for her phone to type her order, but the older man waved a hand dismissively, locked eyes with her, and enunciated clearly, "Good to see you, Hannah. The usual." Stunned by his recall and the intentional effort to communicate, she could only manage a nod before Jean grinned and shuffled off. "He's been working on that," Lucas murmured. "I think your suggestion about the sign really resonated with him." The conversation flowed effortlessly as Lucas updated her on Maisie's therapy breakthroughs, admitting that while the trend was upward, the bad days still hit hard. In turn, Hannah shared news of her promotion, confessing how surreal it felt to plant flags in this town rather than plotting an evacuation. Eventually, the chatter lulled and Lucas leaned in. "Can I ask about the radio silence? Did I overstep somewhere?" Grateful for his straightforwardness, no games, just curiosity. She shook her head. "You did nothing wrong. I panicked. I've spent years building walls because isolation feels like the only safe option. You were kind, your daughter was kind, and I didn't have a blueprint for handling that warmth without sprinting in the opposite direction." A look of profound recognition washed over Lucas's face. "I know that instinct well. After Maisie's mother and I separated, I went into a bunker for 2 years, just work and parenting, because letting anyone else in felt like gambling with stakes I couldn't afford." Hannah blinked, taken aback. It was the first mention of his ex, and she had unconsciously scripted him as a tragic widower, a common trope for single dads in these parts. Catching her surprise, Lucas grimaced. "Oh, right, sorry. I should have cleared the air sooner. I'm not a widower. My ex-wife walked out when Maisie was 4 years old. She was battling severe mental health issues, decided she wasn't cut out for motherhood, signed over full custody, and relocated to Oregon. We haven't heard a word in 3 years. His tone was clinical, but Hannah detected the jagged edge of old pain beneath it. "That must have been devastating for you both?" she offered, to which he simply shrugged. "It was. Still is some days. Maisie still asks about her, and I'm never quite sure how to answer. We just manage it one sunrise at a time, you know." Before leaving, they scheduled coffee for the next week and the week after that. It blossomed into a Saturday ritual coffee conversation consistency. It wasn't explicitly romantic. Just 2 survivors finding solace in someone else who understood the architecture of rebuilding a life from the ground up. By the 3rd weekend, Lucas broached the subject with extreme caution. "You once mentioned you came here to escape something. I don't need the gory details, but I just need to know you're safe now." Hannah valued that he asked without demanding a confession. She typed a brief message and slid the screen toward him. "There was a man. He hurt me. I ran. I am safe now. He has no idea where I am. I'm not ready to get into the gritty details yet." Lucas just offered a slow, reassuring nod. "Okay, whenever you're ready. No rush." That was the lifeline she needed. By then, Maisie had clocked that Hannah was back in the picture. Lucas had dropped it into conversation casual as anything, and Maisie had simply asked, "Oh, cool. Is she nice?" Lucas smiled. "Yeah, kiddo, she's really nice." "Okay." Maisie shrugged and went straight back to her sketchbook. She was 9, and her dad's friends were just background noise unless they had snacks or video games. Around March, Lucas floated the idea of dinner. Just him, Hannah, and Maisie. Hannah's gut instinct was to bail pure reflex, but she swallowed the panic and agreed. It turned out to be disarmingly ordinary. Maisie proudly displayed a painting from art club and chattered away about Zoe, a deaf friend from her old school. She mentioned video calling Zoe to practice signing desperate to pass on every single thing Hannah taught her. So Hannah taught Maisie a few fresh signs right there in the kitchen. They made spaghetti that ended up a little mushy, but honestly, no one gave a damn. Once Maisie was tucked in, Lucas and Hannah drifted to the porch nursing glasses of absolutely terrible gas station wine. Lucas broke the quiet. "I really like hanging out with you. Like, more than friends. I just wanted to put that out there so we aren't guessing, but zero pressure." "I'm not expecting anything from you." Hannah felt her chest tighten, heart thumping a frantic rhythm. "I like spending time with you too. I'm just terrible at this, at letting people in, at trusting that the other shoe won't drop." Lucas leaned back. "Me too. We can figure it out as we go. Slow burn, no expectations. Just see where the road leads." Hannah exhaled a long, shaky breath. "Yeah, I'd like that." They sat in the comfortable silence, watching the street lamps buzz and flicker. It felt like the start of something tangible. Scary, sure, but worth the gamble. Over the next few months, they dated in the lowest gear possible. Weekly dinners, Saturday coffees, texts about nothing and everything. Hannah met Maisie's therapist, then Lucas's brother slowly weaving into the fabric of his days while he wove into hers. 8 months after that first cup of coffee at Murphy's, they were officially a thing, the kind where nobody announces it because everybody already knows. Maisie was cool with it. She thought Hannah was funny and kind, but mostly she was busy being a kid's school drama friend's art club. The three of them shared a table twice a week. It wasn't some instant picture-perfect family montage. It was just 3 distinct humans learning how to fit in the same room. Hannah still hadn't fully committed to staying in town forever. She still had flashes of pure flight instinct visualizing the exit, but she was learning to sit with the anxiety rather than packing a bag. And Lucas was learning that loving someone meant giving them the room to be unsure without taking it as a rejection. That summer, the diner hired Tyler, a young guy on the autism spectrum. He was a wizard with numbers but tripped up on social cues, so Jean adapted. She put up a small sign asking customers for a little extra patience. "We're all doing our best." Some folks loved it, some grumbled, but the business kept humming along just fine. Progress doesn't always need a marching band to be real. On a random Thursday, Lucas and Hannah were tucked into a booth at Murphy's. Maisie was there too, nose deep in a fantasy book, only half listening. Jean slid their plates onto the table and signed "Enjoy" in ASL, something Hannah had shown her weeks ago. A single gesture, small but heavy with meaning. Hannah looked around. At Lucas, currently stealing a fry off her plate. At Maisie, completely lost in another world. At Jean, wiping the counter and humming flat notes to the radio. And she felt this quiet, grounded sensation wash over her. Eventually, she recognized it as contentment. No fireworks, no cinematic swells of music. Just the steady, boring knowledge that she was exactly where she needed to be. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't leaving, it's staying. Putting down roots in rocky soil with messy people, trusting that it's okay if it doesn't last forever as long as it's real right now. Hannah was relearning that lesson one day at a time. One coffee. One Thursday dinner at a time. If this story reminded you that healing is a jagged line and community is messy and that sometimes the smallest waves make the biggest changes in how we see each other, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and share this with someone who needs to hear that it is okay to stop running and let yourself be found. Thanks for being here with us. We'll catch you in the next one.